grand unveiling of a really important statue in the centre of Leicester, and that was in honour of the suffragette Alice Hawkins. Now, we know all about her story. We've heard it very recently, and it's wonderful. But do we know anything about the contribution that Sikh women made to the movement? Well, this Friday sees a presentation from Dr Priya Atwal, a Doctor of History at Oxford University. And Priya joins me on the phone right now. Good morning.
Hi, Emma. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm well, thank you. Now, you weren't able to join us in the studio because you're down in London at the moment, I believe.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, you're busy.
I'll be back in Leicester on Friday. Very much looking forward to it.
Excellent stuff. We can't wait either. Now, this is very much your specialist subject, isn't it? Because your doctorate was very much along these lines, and this really encapsulates your specialist subject matter.
Yes, that's right. So my research as a PhD student at Oxford, I explored Anglo-Indian royal relations. I was specifically looking at the relationship between the royal family of Queen Victoria and the rulers of the Punjab, the family of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And the Punjab Empire is today split between India and Pakistan, that whole region. But the descendants of that empire, after it was taken over by the British East India Company, they wound up in England and were among the first Sikh settlers in the UK. The family of Maharaja Dalip Singh, whose one of his youngest daughter, Sophia Dalip Singh, ended up being part of the suffragette movement in the UK.
Now, I'm right in thinking that the journalist Anita Anand has actually written a book about this woman, hasn't she? Because she is so significant, and she's been trying to bring the story of her to the fore.
Yes, she has. Anita's book is fantastic. It tells the story of Sophia. Her life as a princess, but obviously a princess without a kingdom, and then her journey into becoming a suffragette and a revolutionary. My research kind of looks at the family before Sophia's time, and I particularly am interested in the women who. The relatives of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the wives, the mothers-in-law, and the daughters-in-law, who were also amazing women and political figures in their own right, who, when the kingdom was up and running, helped to build it and then to protect it, and also to try and fight off against, the threat of British annexation. So Sophia Dalip Singh, in a way, I find her story so interesting, not just in her own right, but because of the lineage that she comes from of these powerful women. And although Anita's done a fantastic job of telling Sophia's story and bringing that to light in the UK, I'm now trying to wind back time a little bit further and say, well, what about all the women that came before her from her own family? And just show that trajectory, really, that's unfortunately been forgotten for quite a while.
Why do you think these stories haven't really been told up to now?
There's many reasons. I mean, I think, history tends to be a bit too male focused in general, and people don't, the figure of Ranjit Singh, for example, the founder of the Sikh Empire, he's a heroic figure in Sikh history and Indian history more generally, I would say. He's known as the Lion of the Punjab, and people have tended to look to him as the hero, but he's kind of hogged the glory for a little bit, I would say, for a bit too long. And in looking at digging him up and digging up his story and his role, people have almost forgotten to look at the other characters around him. And I think the other big problem that I've discovered whilst doing my research was that the British, who were involved with the Punjab and that kingdom at that time, in that era, really didn't like female rule. So they really trashed the idea of these women that were involved in power. And any histories that they wrote at the time really kind of ripped into them. And that's what people have tended to just take for granted, that representation was, quite accurate. But when you go back to the original sources that were produced, the art, the architecture of the buildings that these women commissioned, even Persian courtly diaries that tell their story and their activities on a day-to-day basis, you see that they were so heavily involved in, things like education of princes, in army maneuvers, in politics, in organising marriages and that kind of thing, and running their own little estates. And I'm really curious to wonder how much knowledge Sophia Dalip Singh had of these, these female forebears of her own, and whether that shaped her own political interests. I mean, we're never going to know. There's nothing on record like that. But, what an amazing heritage to have as a young woman.
How different do you think it would have been if Sophia had been able to sort of realise her potential as a leader and continue to be at the forefront of her dynasty?
Well, you know, what a big question. I mean,
put you on the spot there, Priya.
Well, her older sister, Bamba, was very hot on that, actually. Sophia was less interested, as far as I understand, in going back to the Punjab and seeking back that family heritage. Her older sister returned to Lahore and lived the rest of her days out there. And it's actually very poignant because, you know, she used to say that, I mean, on her gravestone, for example, it talks about how the difference between royalty and civility vanishes once you die. Like, if you dig up the body, there's no difference in their status, essentially. And she used to say that she felt like an alien walking around in the city that her grandfather and her father once ruled over as kings. So I think, you know, I mean, there were definitely Indian royal women who got very involved in politics in the British era, and even when their kingdoms were kind of semi-controlled by Britain, though yet still semi-independent. And some of those women went to go on and be involved in the Indian Parliament that was set up after 1947. So I think Sophia and her sisters probably would have been very active in that kind of environment had they had the opportunity. I mean, her other sister, Catherine, was a suffragist rather than a suffragette. So she, again, got involved in the women's rights movement. But they all of them died quite soon after Indian independence. So it's a bit of a big what-if question. But I definitely think they would have been involved.
What's the difference between a suffragist and a suffragette?
Suffragist was someone who believed in fighting for women's rights through more peaceful means, whereas suffragettes were potentially more radical and violent. So, you know, the kind of famous actions that we've heard of about chaining themselves to railings or throwing yourself in front of the king's horse or resisting tax, for example, all of those types of activities were what the suffragettes did, whereas suffragists were more about kind of political petitioning or, you know, more peaceful methods of protest, basically.
Now, you're a doctor. You have studied extensively in your field, and you've got quite a lot in common with the sisters of Sophia Dalip Singh, haven't you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a princess. That would have been cool, but no, I was very fortunate to study at Oxford University, and that's something that I can have a claim to link with the older sisters of Sophia Dalip Singh, Bamba and Catherine. They were amongst the first women of Asian heritage to study at Oxford University in the 1890s, together with another lady called Cornelia Sarabji, who again went to become a prominent figure in Indian politics and who becomes a lawyer. So for me, I mean, I was the first in my immediate family to go to university in the UK, and to get into Oxford was just like, you know, a dream come true. No one ever expected it to happen, kind of thing. So, those ladies went to Somerville College, and I went to Oriel College and then Lady Margaret Hall. But just to know, it was something that I discovered while I was studying at Oxford. That,
I was going to ask,
connection.
Were you aware beforehand?
Yeah, I had no idea. Actually, before I went to university and started studying history, I had no idea that the Sikh Empire existed, that this royal family existed. And having grown up in a British Sikh background, you know, it's kind of embarrassing, you know, and as a history student to then suddenly learn about all this stuff once I was at university. But it blew my mind. It really captured my interest. And I really, you know, as soon as I went to a talk at the Student Sikh Society and learned about all of this, and I went home and I said to my dad, how come you didn't tell me about this? This is amazing. And it was the story of the women actually that captured my interest in the first case. Actually, the story of Maharani Jind Kaur, who was the last queen of the Sikhs, who fought tooth and nail to kind of keep the kingdom independent from British rule, and who was then, of course, Sophia Dalip Singh's grandmother. And it was that story that captured me and made me want to find out more, to say, who was this woman? You know, how did she campaign for her power and all this kind of stuff? And these are the stories that I want to talk about next week on Friday, to share with everyone and to pass that torch on, really, because there's still so much research and information to be uncovered about these people. I'm just, you know, I'm going to have a book coming out about this subject next year with the publisher's Hearst. I've literally just had the contract come through, so it's a very exciting time for me personally. But I really want to share that knowledge with people because, especially for young women, our history isn't, you know, as well documented or talked about, and there's so much more to find out. And it would be great to keep sparking off this conversation and taking it more broadly, really.
Well, it's fascinating. I know when we spoke earlier in the week on the phone, you couldn't shut me up for going, wow, really? What? Oh my goodness. It's just such a fascinating subject. And I know that we've given everybody a little flavour of it, and hopefully we have just piqued everyone's interest, as I was piqued when I saw the title of the talk. I'm really excited. I'm going to try and make it along on Friday.
Oh, please do.
Have you got the details there of where and when we should be, when we should be there?
It's part of the Contemporary Sikh Art Exhibition, and I would encourage everyone to go onto the Sikh Museum Initiative website, which has all the details of the event. It's in Leicester, on Belvoir Road, I believe, at the old Library Cafe, but the details are all on the website. I don't know how many tickets are available, but it is all free. So I would contact the Sikh Museum Initiative as soon as you can to book those tickets if you're interested in coming along. I think everything kicks off from 5:30 next Friday.
It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Dr. Priya Atwal, I really, really appreciate you joining me on the phone today. It's been lovely to talk to you. And
thank you so much for having me on.
I do hope that I will catch you on Friday, and that everybody else gets to learn much more about this wonderful subject that you've drawn to light. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.